All right, so we're going to spend this week wrapping up the draft weekend that literally just happened, well, over the weekend. And we're going to do that, or at least we're going to start off all this coverage this Monday with a Q&A about all your questions about days 1, 2, and 3 from the drafts. We're going to start with a question from Cancel Anime, who says, do you think Anthony Schwartz will be used to open up the deep ball passing game even more for Baker so he can take shots like he did in 2018 with Callaway and Perriman, although hopefully he turns out better than those two? Well, if he turns out to be Brashard Perriman, especially for what Brashard Perriman was in 2018, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Look, every single pick does not need to be an absolute grand slam home run. Like, he does not need to be Tyreek Hill for this to work out. He does not even need to be Mike Wallace for him to work out. If he is what Brashard Perriman was in 2018, that works out for this team, quite frankly. So, I don't know where the expectations are for Anthony Schwartz. I've heard like all kind of things about him. Look, he's very fast. He runs a 4.25. But he's all potential at this point. So I don't want people to get wrapped up into what they hope he is. And then, if he doesn't pan out to be that, then they will focus on what he's not instead of what he does bring. Brashard Perriman, if he does what Brashard Perriman does, that's fine. And that's all you really need him to do. Somebody who could take end around, somebody who could spread the field out, somebody who could be a deep threat. Maybe he turns into what Ted Ginn turned to in his career, which is a more polished wide receiver, a reliable second option, but an X receiver, not somebody who's going to be leading your team in targets, but somebody who can spread the defense out and do those things. And I think that's probably around the ceiling for Anthony Schwartz. Obviously, I like his speed, right? 4.25, that's nothing to play around with. Can he run routes with that same level of explosiveness? I don't know. He doesn't really have like great ball skills yet. And I don't know where his hands are. Like if he is a great catcher at the football, I haven't seen any red flags so far. But yeah, Anthony Schwartz is an interesting piece, but please don't set your sights super high on this. Like, yeah, sure, there's a chance that he can break out and become a dominant star, but more than likely, if you get Brashard Perriman out of him, that's a success. Next question comes from Pedro, who says, hey, Q, big fan from Brazil here. Do you realize as soon as Aziz went, the Browns moved up and got JOK? Was that a coincidence? Or our front office was waiting for the best opportunity to get one of them? I would assume, right, those are two players that of varying interests to this team, right? We knew edge rusher could be a priority, but we also knew that there were about a number of edge rushers that most teams thought were draftable in this draft, and that if the Browns weren't able to get their hands on one of them, then they probably weren't going to go edge rusher in this draft. And I think Aziz, by the time he went, was definitely one of the few people that you will be very comfortable drafting there. So yeah, Aziz was probably in that conversation while they were trying to move up, and JOK was in that conversation. JOK was available when the Browns picked, and I think that's why they went into it. Aziz would have been a great get if they could have got him in the second round, and I think he's going to be a great get for the Giants. So yeah, I think applaud Andrew Berry there for pulling the trigger and trading up. And the next question comes from Robo Knight, who says, what player from the draft do you believe will be the most impactful for the Cleveland Browns? JOK. But probably in year one, Greg Newsome, right? Because he plays the position where there is the most straightforward path to being an impact player. For JOK, they got to figure something out for him to do in different ways to utilize him. That might take a year or two for him to really get comfortable and really spread his wings in that kind of a role. But for Greg Newsome, they're going to ask him to compete for that other boundary corner position with Greedy Williams. If he wins that battle, which I anticipate he probably will, then he's going to probably be a very impactful player for this team. So I would go Gregory Newsome there, but thank you for the question. The next question comes from Troy Farron, who says, hey, Q, what do you think the Browns' weakest position after the draft, and do you think they should sign a cheap free agent to help it? No, I mean, at this point, we're not really signing any cheap free agents that are going to make the team unless somebody gets cut. But I don't know what the weakest position on this team is. Maybe tight end didn't produce, but even if I do say a position is weak, it doesn't mean it's an indictment on that position group. It just means relatively, when you look at the ridiculous depth on this team, right, that the position group is weak. And a lot of these position groups on the Browns have a ton of depth. You look at quarterback, you got Baker Mayfield, who you feel really confident about. You got Case Keenum, who's a decent enough backup, right? Better than most backups in the NFL. Then you got Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, the running back room. We know how deep that is. So Dearness Johnson as well. Don't forget about him. Wide receiver room's probably one of the weaker ones, and there's Odell and Jarvis in that room with Donovan Peoples-Jones and Rashard Higgins, who you still feel good about. You got 5 players that you probably feel good about in the wide receiving room, and it might be one of the weaker ones. The tight end room, just as far as pure production, has been a little underwhelming, but still a ton of potential. Harrison Bryant, Austin Hooper, and David Njoku, who you would all hope to see them play up to their potential in next year, but, maybe they're the weakest group. If you go to the defensive side of ball, Jadeveon, Miles, Takk McKinley, Porter Gustin, it's a pretty strong group there, but maybe you're saying, well, you're depending on some injury-prone guys, and Takk McKinley, who hasn't done much. Defensive tackle is probably the weakest position group. A lot of bodies, just, you don't know what you're going to see out of them. Everybody's pretty much new there, especially without Sheldon Richardson. Linebacking, it's not the greatest room in the world, but you added JOK to it, and honestly, it was fine going into the draft. Now with the best linebacker in the draft, in my opinion, it's more than fine. His secondary room has been improved greatly. So, yeah, probably somewhere between defensive tackle and tight end are the 2 weakest position groups, and it's not like they don't have enough bodies in those rooms. It's just they need somebody to step up. So, no, I wouldn't sign a cheap free agent at this point. Next question comes from Elijah Cable, who says, will Demetric Felton be a gadget weapon or learn under Hunt to be a featured wide receiver kind of back? First things first for Demetric is he's going to try to make the team, right? If Demetric beats out Dearness, which he has his work cut out, Dearness is a pretty good running back. Then, we could talk about what role Demetric's going to try to do. But honestly, for Demetric Felton, I don't think there's like a great plan for him. I don't think they're trying to figure it out. They're just going to put him at running back, see if he can play a little running back. And if he can play running back, then they'll see if he could do more at that point. But yeah, I think he's probably one of those guys just trying to fight to be on the team at this point, especially with how crowded the roster is. Jeremy Allison says, who do you think are the trade or cut candidates that would not make the roster by week 1 on such a competitive roster right now? Well, they've cut everybody that you would thought they would have cut, or the reasons they would have had to cut them, right? They cut Sheldon Richardson. They cut ties with Olivier Vernon and all those guys. So I don't know who are the cut candidates, especially since the most likely cut candidates will be on defense, with everybody on offense being locked up, and everybody on defense is new. So I don't think there are any cut or trade candidates. I think this is pretty much the bunch you're going to get opening day. Next question is from Charles Cummings Sr., who says 2 questions. 1, which players currently on the roster are in danger of losing their spot? I'll answer that right now. It's Greedy Williams, and Greedy Williams probably the most in danger of losing their spot. 2, what is your opinion of undrafted free agent defensive tackle Marvin Wilson, who was signed out of Florida? Like Marvin Wilson, love his size. Went undrafted. So, they have a roster spot in mind with as much guaranteed money as they gave to him. He'll have a real opportunity to make the team. We'll see, man. They got a couple of bodies, a couple of flyers out there at defensive tackle. We'll see what happens there, especially him, Tommy Tungai, and then Jordan Elliott, all in that bunch of young guys trying to see snaps in the inside of that defense. Next question comes from Jack, who says, hey, Q, Steelers selected Najee Harris. Do you think the Browns will be able to stop him, or will he be a problem for the future? I mean, they stopped Derrick Henry last year, and they had a pretty bad defense. So, I don't think it's out the realm of possibility to imagine they can tackle Najee Harris, especially with all the work that they have done, especially, too, since the Steelers really didn't do much on their offensive line front. It's going to be Chuks Okorafor, it's going to be Zach Banner, and whatever they're doing to replace Marquise Pouncey at this point. So why should I assume the Steelers, who at the 32nd ranked everything in the run game, offensive line, running back personnel, everything last year, are going to be this unstoppable run team just because they drafted Najee Harris? I like Najee Harris' athleticism, but is he athletic enough to just play without a good offensive line? The survey says no. And if you look at his first 2 years at Alabama, even with good offensive line play, he wasn't necessarily what he looked like his third year. Now, maybe he put it together in his third year, but if you're expecting Najee Harris to single-handedly dismantle the Cleveland Browns because he's such a great running back that he doesn't need an offensive line, then, I don't see it. Next question comes from Elijah Cable, who says, our D-line room is young but crowded with similar players. Who starts? Miles, Billings, Clowney, and who? Elliott, Jackson, Day, Tungai. Well, it's going to be Malik Jackson, right? Because they signed him to start. And it's really going to be a question between Billings, Tungai, and Marvin Wilson. There's probably 2 spots available for that other defensive tackle, that bigger defensive tackle role, and then maybe 1 spot on the practice squad for somebody. But that's probably it, right? That's the competition. Is Billings going to win that battle out? Is he going to be able to hold off Tommy Tungai? Or are one of these guys going to be able to make a competitive argument on the field to kind of sway them from being on the practice squad? That's the real competition, in my opinion. But thank you for the question. And thank you guys for the questions this week. Always enjoy answering you guys' questions, especially after the draft. But again, guys, thank you for watching. Have a great day. Have a good night.